So for the first lesson for this week, we have something we're calling Bitmap Conversion. And last week you were uh, doing the same thing but manually. So we had that coloring book assignment where clearly these things were drawn in a vector program to begin with, but this image I gave you was a JPEG, so it's a bitmap, right? And so you were manually creating new shapes in order to create a vector version of that. Today we're going to be looking at tools that do that automatically. But before you get annoyed with me for having you done it manually first, we should keep in mind that this is not going to work out the way you think it is. It's not going to work out super perfectly. So first up, I'm going to open up a JPEG. I've got this picture of a little kitty cat, just so we can review. Right, this is very different than what you were converting last time, stuff that looked like it was made in a vector in the first place. This always lived its life as a raster. We've got all those, actually I'm going to have to zoom in a little bit more and make sure you guys can see it on the video. A map of bits, right? That's what a bitmap is. So this was really never meant to be vectorized. We're going to use this tool as a way to kind of like make it look artsy. It's going to be like an effect, like a filter almost. So we just go into Illustrator, we say create new, there we go, and eventually it opens. No. But first we have to put the image in here. This is something we haven't done before, but if we go File, Place, we can navigate to, let me see, I need to go to my downloads folder. There we go. So we can navigate to the image, which I have a lot of stuff in my downloads folder. Perhaps I should fix it. I select the image that I want, and it kind of is asking me where I want to put it. Once I click, then I can see the image. There's not much we can do with this image right now. It has a bounding box around it, which means we can shrink it. We can rotate it around, and we can move it. That's it. I think you can. Okay, we can make it semi-transparent. You're not going to be erasing the tail and not the rest of the cat. You're not going to be doing very much with this image until we make it a vector. Right? All these editing tools, they're not going to do anything. One last thing to go over before we do anything with this, though. You can see the image is being linked to right up here. And then there's these options here. One of them we're going to use in a minute. Edit original will open it up in Photoshop, so you can edit it. Then there's this. Right now we are linked to this file, meaning it is looking in my downloads folder for the JPEG, and then placing sort of a preview of the JPEG in Illustrator. I don't want that. I want this to follow me because this is not, if I was working in a major project where like someone was giving me a graphic that needed to be fed into here and then it would be updated, then you link. That's not what we're doing. So I'm going to click embed. And what that means is that now this is always in the file. It's going to make the file larger, but that's okay in this case. All right, so we embed the image. And now we need to start using something called image trace. Now you can use this up here, but I want the options. So I'm going to go to Window, Image Trace, and it opens up a nice little box for us. All right, and there's a lot of presets in here. It starts off with black and white, which we can't see yet because we haven't clicked this. If you click this, you can get a preview of what's going on. So these are the default settings. Obviously not what we want. Black and white means it's going to choose for every pixel it was looking at, is this new space going to be black or white? And then there's this threshold. More of it's going to be black, more of it's going to be white, right. There's also Grayscale, which comes up with, you can see it takes a little bit to process, a grayscale representation of it. And again, we can use this here to change the assortment of, there we go, how many grays it's being used. So there's only 12 different colors right here, which is why it's so kind of segmented. If I drag this way up, it's going to add a lot more, there you go, a lot more detail, a lot more gradation, because it has fewer choices it has to make. The lower the number, the more times it has to say, well, you either got to be this or this, and so you're going to change drastically. And then there's color. which can be limited or full palette. Now, yours probably won't take as long to process. I'm recording my screen. Fingers crossed it doesn't crash. So this is recording your screen is very intensive. For you guys, it should just be a little bit of a click. There's a limited color palette, and then there's a full tone color palette. So depending on the image you're converting, wow. Now, I look at this and I almost wonder, why am I doing this? Because we have so many colors that we're using and it's full tone. It looks like a bitmap image that has weird bubbly edges, and then the tail is funny. If I zoom in, it's a different story. If I zoom in, you can start to see what it's doing. But this is so heavy, it's like, why am I bothering? The more I turn down the color, fewer colors it has, the more abstract it looks. Now this looks like the filter I was talking about. All right, so if you use this full tone color palette, more colors, fewer colors, there you go. Now, there is also an advanced tab. And the advanced tab has extra things that we can worry about to kind of further refine things. So paths has to do with basically how many paths it's willing to draw to kind of look like the shape. And normally you don't swing these back and forth so drastically, but I'm doing that to kind of show you how they work. So you can see all the little pointy parts, right? This got way less rounded than it was because there was more paths to draw the shape. Then if I come down here, fewer paths means it's more blocky. Stick that back in the middle. Corners, if I bring this all the way down, it should also make it... that's actually more in the refined details, so we're going to zoom in. Let me see here. This corners one will mean a lot more when we get to the homework portion of events. But if I have it turned all the way up, it changes the way those details are rendered. There's a little bit of a change in the corners. It doesn't matter as much here because I have so many paths going on and there's so much detail in this. When we get to something that started life as a vector, it's going to make a huge difference. And noise is sort of how much noise detail it's willing to tolerate and look at. You can see just how many more extra bits showed up when I turn this up, whereas if I turn it down, no, JK. Maybe the middle will make it. There you go. It's a little bit harder to work with it has a different effect on something that started life as a raster. So it can start to have funny options. All right, so this is extremely abstract. It's probably not what I want it to look like. So I'm going to shift things a little bit. There we go. I want less noise, but I want more paths. The last thing we can look at under options here is something called method, which is either abutting or overlapping. If we come over here to where the eyes are, abutting means that it's all like a bunch of interlocking jigsaw puzzle pieces. So this is a shape, and then this is next to that shape. Overlapping, you'll notice it mostly looks the same. There's a couple of shifts. But what's happening is any two things that are like the same color, it's gonna like draw the line down here. And so this is on top of this is on top of this. Another way to see it, let me put it back to abutting. Under view, we didn't look at this setting yet. Under view, instead of tracing result, you can say tracing result with outlines. And those are your shapes. And you can see that they are all interlocking. When I expand this though, you're going to see why that could be a problem. If I do overlapping, you can see now how these things are, this one is drawn underneath here and then this was on top of here. It's basically a simpler way of drawing each shape, but it also means there's overlapping pieces. You can also look, by the way, at just outlines over the source image, or you can be reminded of the source image. So if you're looking at the tracing result and you're especially if you're zoomed out a little bit. Be like, wait, what did this look like before? Like, where was I coming from? You can go to source image and go, oh yeah, that's what the cat looks like. Because you might be, see the whole thing shifts down a little bit, might be that whatever settings you have, you've lost part of the ear. It's always good when you're doing something this heavily processed to sort of check back and forth and see what it is you started with, so you can see if what you're ending up with is what you want. All right, so let's say this is perfect. It's what I need. And we need it to be done, and we need to actually turn it into a vector that we can then work with. There's an expand button right here, and once I click that, now you can see this goes blank because there's no longer a bitmap for it to trace. And I had a wrong setting, so we're gonna undo. So this is undoable if you don't do anything else. So if I put it through and I go, oh my gosh, I forgot, I needed this to be abutting, then I can hit expand again and then go back. But if I do a whole bunch of other work, I can't then press a button to turn this from vector to bitmap such that it looks like the original cat picture, right? It's never going to look like this again. You can rasterize it in terms of spitting the vector image out of this program and turning it into a raster, but you can't turn it back into the original raster. All right, what you end up with, if we look at our layers, is a group. There's a group of things, a group of a lot of things. Look at all those little pieces. Which means if I want to edit something directly, I have to double click and go into isolation mode. And if we go back here, you can see that's this piece. And if I move this piece, that's what abutting is. I took that piece out and now there's nothing there, which may be what you want. Now that this is a vector, I can change these things however I want. I can change individual pieces and colors and things like that. There we go. I can change the shape of these things if I want. I just need the direct select tool. If I want to, I can... that's weird. Oh, it's underneath. I was wondering why it wasn't working. It's underneath this piece, so we were never going to see that. But if I move this... there we go. So you can directly edit these things. Although, except for maybe a couple of choice tiny little settings, you're probably not going to do that very much, because this is using an image trace on an image like this is more for the effect of it. You know, it's a sort of arty filter kind of a thing. It's not as functional. All right, so that's one use for this. Delete. So the other use for this, and this is what the homework is. Let me go to the right browser. It says Bitmap Conversion, and it gives you an image, which you can right-click, save the image. And download folder. So it's called Cottage. And this is clearly something that started life as a vector. You can tell just by looking at it. This was not drawn in Photoshop, right? This is like sort of a pointy ellipse, and there's triangles and squares, and a square that they punched a hole into, right? There's half moon shape right here. So these are, this was a vector, and they were also transparent, right? And what happened is, so for our assignment, we're going to use the image trace to convert this from a raster into a vector, in large part to show you how it's really not possible to go backwards without manually drawing this, right? Just like you guys did the coloring book, you could pretty easily manually draw this. What I'm imagining the scenario is, you've got a client and they say, we have this thing, we used to have it a long time ago, we want to make changes, we want the trees to be orange or something and the door to be red, whatever. And imagine they're like, oh, we can just bring it in and convert it. What I want to show you is why that's not really plausible, and why, so that you'll understand that it really is just easier to draw it. So while this tool has its place, this isn't that place. So we go File, Place, and it's called Cottage. Oh no, it's called 3 Cottage, excuse me. There we go. And it's letter size, so if you don't already have a letter sized thing open, there we go. It's letter sized. I left the text in here. This text is a different set of instructions from a different assignment, but I left it in here because it's interesting to see how it reacts differently than the picture. We're aiming to make the picture look as close as possible. What do you see what happens with the text? It's kind of funny. All right, so we're going to embed this, and we're going to go to Window, Image Trace. We're going to make sure we're viewing the tracing result. We're going to make sure it's set to color, and we're going to say Preview. All right, now this, if you hear anything, that's my cat. It looks like it might be okay. We're going to point out a few problematic things in a second. Let me zoom in. So if we, there you go. This has to be selected in order for these things to be shown. So if I go to Tracing Result Outlines, the outlines aren't doing half so bad. There's not a lot of extra schmutz running around everywhere. I can tell it to do overlapping instead of the abutting. That can maybe help a little bit, given that these were originally stacked on top of each other anyways. I want to see what happens when I go from full tone, or from limited tone to full tone. And oh yeah, good. I'm glad that broke. So you can see here that does not work very well for this one. It worked well for the artistic-y looking one we were doing. Here, not so much. We're going to go back to limited. Part of that is because the original thing is limited, right? It's very few colors, and so you want to tell it to not go crazy. The other reason is that is not the right one. The other reason is that the original JPEG also it's a really crummy JPEG, which is kind of why I like it as an example. If we zoom it, like look, this, what is all this schmutz? I'm wondering if you guys can even see it on the YouTube video. There should be the jaggedy edges here, right? Because it's not sure whether it's the branch now or the green thing, and that's how bitmaps have to work. It has to be stepped. But all of this, where did that come from? There's all sorts of schmutz here. There's sort of like no excuse for that. If you are converting something from a vector to a JPEG in order to send it to someone, you should be doing a better job than this. So that is one of the things we are fighting in this, and so it's why even when we do limited color, we've got some problems. Now, what we can do is start to tinker with the settings. We can limit the colors even further. I'm noticing that these are not squares. We can try and turn up the corners a little bit. There we go. They're mostly squares except for a couple really bad ones. We can tinker with the amount of paths, right? So these different, that actually made these a little bit more squiggly, but it gave us back our branches. So this is the struggle, is that one part of this might react differently than the other part, and then what do you do? See, that's too few paths because it lost this shape. So we kind of need to be in the middle on paths, clearly. Here we go. I also usually swing these too far in one direction or the other so I can see what it does. I want to know what that setting does, and so I swing it too far to the side, and then I see, oh, okay, it does this. So high corners, medium paths, relatively low noise, limited color palette. You can see there's only 18 colors. It says it right there. It actually says how many paths there are. Lots of anchor points, but not nearly as many as the cat. The cat was something around like 5,000 or 6,000. And this is okay. This isn't great. You see what it did to the text. Text is a very different shape than the rest of this. But you can also see that this is not ideal, right? Now, Oh, I also lost the sun. Um, so I happen to know the sun is a two-tone kind of a thing. So if I up, I'm wondering if I up the number of colors, I'll get it back. There it is. That's what it's supposed to look like. So one of the things we have to do is make sure we're paying attention to the whole image and doing this, which is tracing result source. So you can kind of see what the original looked like and then go back to this. Now, we could tinker with this for a while. And you could probably get it so that most of the windows were nicely squared off. And there was not too many weird things going on with the branches. Let's pretend we have all day to do this. And I hit expand. And it makes everything look great, mostly. And then I double click. And I'm like, oh, I want to change this grass to be a slightly different color. Maybe I want it to match this one. And I get this. This is separate from this because it's two different colors in the JPEG. We can look at this as human beings and understand that when this was built, this was all one piece and it was semi-transparent. And so here you can see the blue through it, and here you could see the tree through it. Like that we can understand that that's what's going on. This cannot do that. Look at this. This is in 3 pieces. This is in 4 pieces, excuse me. And then this one is in 4 pieces. 5 pieces. There's another piece down there. Crazy. So you can start to see how, even if I can make this look right, what use is it? Because now, if the client's like, well, I need the door to be red. Well, the door is in 2 pieces, at least. And it's interacting with this. And so now what am I going to do? Merge them and then make it's so much more work. So yes, there is an image trace function. And yes, it can take something that is a bitmap and turn it into a vector. But it is not going to just make it work like magic. So if I'm a professional, and I mean I am, but if I was hired by someone and they said, I had this thing and I want to make it, but I want to make variations of it, it would be my job as a proper contractor to tell my would-be client, okay, we can't edit this the way you want to. We can't right now. You could explain as best as possible the difference between bitmap and vector, and then say, I will have to redraw it in the vector program. It will take a little bit of time, it will cost X amount of money, but in the end, if we save that file, you will then be able to have all your variations. You could do one for winter and spring and summer and fall. Like this is summer, so we could do an autumn one. Everything's orange. You could do a winter one, add some snow. We can do all these variations. And in the long run, you will have better artwork. And you can even tell them, maybe, oh, we're saving a little bit of money because I don't have to redesign this. But you will have to draw it. It will be cheaper for you, the worker, you will be able to charge them less for it being drawn than you would for this image trace. If you try to say, oh, we'll just do this little thing real quick and bang, bang, it's done, you're going to run into problems and you're going to end up overpromising, which is never a good place to be. And then you're not even going to be able to make the changes they wanted you to make in the first place. Like, how are we going to change this tree to orange? It's in 7 pieces. They're all different colors. They don't line up, right? So what I want you guys to do is to get as close as possible with this. Use the image trace. Get the settings that you think are best, ignoring the text, to get this to a good point, to see if for you to use it correctly. But and then save it with your name on it. But I also want you to understand that this is not the best solution. The reason I had you do the drawings last week was because that's the best solution. All right, so work on that. It's kind of as best as you can. And there we go. And then all of these should be submitted along with the pen tool and the compass to week 3 submission.